put your phone or device aside and immerse yourself in this audio story. Perfect for listening on the move, while relaxing, or for bedtime listening. We release new stories daily, so make sure to like and subscribe to not miss out. This story is based on true events. The Phantom Empire. In the summer of 2014, a secret meeting took place in a luxurious Dubai hotel suite. The men gathered there weren't diplomats or oil tycoons. They were power brokers from one of the world's most brutal regimes. And they had just agreed to funnel billions into a Silicon Valley startup that would soon touch nearly every corner of the globe. The company was Uber. The money was dark. And the consequences would reshape how billions of people live, work, and move through their cities. This is the story of how blood money built the world's most valuable startup, and why the truth behind Uber's rise was buried deeper than anyone imagined. Travis Kalanick didn't invent ride-sharing. He weaponized it. When Uber launched in 2010, it was marketed as a simple solution to a simple problem. Getting a cab in San Francisco was frustrating, but beneath that clean, minimalist app interface was something far darker. An empire built on a business model that required infinite money, scorched earth tactics, and investors willing to look the other way. Kalanick understood something that most entrepreneurs don't. In the modern age of venture capital, profit doesn't matter. Growth does. Domination does. And if you can convince the right people that you're building the future, they'll give you whatever you need to crush anyone who stands in your way. The early money came from Silicon Valley's usual suspects: benchmark capital, first-round capital, the kind of firms that bet on disruptive ideas. But Uber wasn't just disruptive. It was predatory. The company's strategy was simple and brutal. Enter a city, undercut local taxi services with artificially low prices, subsidized by venture capital. Saturate the market before regulators could respond, and destroy the competition through sheer financial force. It wasn't innovation, it was economic warfare, and it required staggering amounts of cash. By 2013, Uber was burning through hundreds of millions of dollars annually, operating at massive losses in nearly every market. The company needed bigger investors, darker investors, investors who didn't ask questions. That's when the Saudis arrived. In June 2016, Saudi Arabia's public investment fund, the sovereign wealth fund controlled by the kingdom's ruling family, announced a stunning investment, $3.5 billion into Uber. It was the largest single investment in any private company in history at that time. The deal gave the Saudis a seat on Uber's board and made Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman's fund one of the company's largest shareholders. Silicon Valley celebrated the partnership. Tech blogs praised the visionary collaboration between innovation and sovereign capital. But nobody asked the obvious question: why would one of the world's most repressive regimes invest billions in a ride-sharing app? The answer lies in what money like this actually buys. Saudi Arabia wasn't investing in Uber because they believed in disrupting transportation. They were buying influence, access, and legitimacy. The kingdom was in the middle of a massive image rehabilitation campaign, trying to position itself as a modernizing force while simultaneously waging a brutal war in Yemen, crushing dissent at home, and maintaining one of the world's strictest religious autocracies. Uber gave them something priceless: a connection to the future, to youth culture, to the gleaming promise of Silicon Valley innovation. Every time someone opened the Uber app, they were unknowingly participating in the financial ecosystem that the Saudi regime had embedded itself within. The dark money wasn't just funding expansion, it was buying normalization. But the Saudi investment was only part of a larger pattern. Uber had become a magnet for sovereign wealth funds and authoritarian capital from across the globe. Russia's oligarch-backed investment vehicles poured money in. Chinese state-affiliated funds became major backers. Wealth from Qatar, the UAE, and other Gulf monarchies flowed through complex financial structures into Uber's war chest. These weren't traditional investors looking for returns. They were geopolitical actors using venture capital as a tool of soft power. And Travis Kalanick welcomed them all, because in his world there was no such thing as dirty money. There was only fuel for the empire. Inside Uber, the culture reflected the moral flexibility of its funding sources. The company operated like a criminal enterprise disguised as a tech startup. They developed a tool called Greyball, designed to identify and deceive law enforcement officials, trying to catch Uber operating illegally in cities where it was banned. When regulators requested rides, the software would show them fake cars, phantom drivers, or cancelled trips, a systematic program to obstruct justice. They ran Operation Slog, a covert campaign to sabotage their main competitor, Lyft, by having Uber employees create fake accounts, order Lyft rides, and then cancel them to waste drivers' time and company resources. Uber's executives tracked journalists who wrote critical stories, accessed their ride history without consent, and used that data to intimidate them. This wasn't just aggressive competition. This was a company that believed it was above the law, and the billions from autocratic regimes made them untouchable. Kalanick called it principled confrontation, the idea that Uber should enter markets without permission, operate illegally, build customer dependency, and dare regulators to shut them down. Once millions of people were hooked on the service. It was regulatory arbitrage through civil disobedience, backed by infinite capital from some of the world's most questionable sources. And it worked. City after city eventually capitulated, changing laws to accommodate Uber's model rather than enforce existing regulations. The company wasn't just disrupting transportation, it was demonstrating that with enough money and enough ruthlessness, corporations could effectively override democratic governance. The dark money gave them the patience to outlast any opposition. But then came the first crack in the facade. In October 2018, journalist Jamal Khashoggi walked into the Saudi consulate in Istanbul and never walked out. The Washington Post columnist and regime critic was murdered in an operation that U.S. intelligence agencies concluded was ordered at the highest levels of the Saudi government. His body was dismembered with a bone saw. The killing shocked the world, and suddenly the question of Saudi investment in Silicon Valley became impossible to ignore. Uber was now directly connected to a regime accused of state-sponsored assassination. The $3.5 billion that had fueled the company's global expansion was blood money in the most literal sense, and Silicon Valley's convenient blindness to the source of its funding was exposed in the harshest possible light. The revelation should have been devastating, but it barely caused a ripple. Uber said nothing. Venture capitalists said nothing. The tech press moved on, because by then, everyone in Silicon Valley had accepted a fundamental truth about the modern financial system. Capital has no nationality, no morality, no memory. Money from autocrats, oligarchs, and regimes with horrific human rights records had become so deeply embedded in the technology sector that condemning it would mean condemning the entire ecosystem. Uber wasn't an exception. It was the rule. The dark money behind its rise had revealed something darker still. The willingness of an entire industry to build the future on foundations of oppression, as long as the valuations kept climbing. By 2019, Uber was preparing for its initial public offering. The company had raised more than $24 billion from investors, making it the most well-funded startup in history. Its valuation topped $100 billion. Travis Kalanick was gone, forced out in 2017 after a series of scandals involving sexual harassment, corporate espionage, and his own toxic leadership. But the empire he built remained, now with a friendlier face and a more diplomatic CEO. The Saudi Public Investment Fund was still there, holding shares worth billions. The dark money was about to become public money, and everyone would profit. The IPO in May 2019 was supposed to be a triumphant moment, the vindication of Uber's strategy, proof that burning billions to dominate markets was visionary rather than reckless. Instead, it became a reckoning. The stock opened below its offering price and continued falling. Investors finally started asking the questions that should have been asked years earlier. Could this company ever actually make money? Was the business model fundamentally broken? Had all the dark money simply created an illusion of success? The company was still losing billions annually. Its path to profitability remained unclear. The emperor had new clothes, but underneath, everyone could see the scars. What Uber's rise really represented was a new model of corporate power in the 21st century. Traditional business scandals involved fraud, embezzlement, or accounting tricks, crimes against investors or shareholders. But Uber's scandal was different. It was about the corruption of an entire system, where authoritarian governments could use their sovereign wealth to buy influence in democratic societies through technology investments, where venture capital had become so addicted to massive returns that the source of the money became irrelevant, where a company could operate illegally in hundreds of cities, crush workers' rights, evade regulations, and still be celebrated as innovative. The dark money behind Uber's rise wasn't just about one company. It was about the transformation of Silicon Valley from a force for progress into a mechanism for concentrating wealth and power among the already powerful. The drivers felt it most acutely. The millions of people who powered Uber's platform discovered too late that they were the product, not the partners. The company had deliberately misclassified them as independent contractors to avoid paying benefits, minimum wage, or providing basic worker protections. Internal documents revealed that Uber knew most drivers were making below minimum wage after expenses, but hid those calculations from the public. The algorithm was designed to maximize extraction, squeezing more hours, more rides, more revenue from drivers, while giving them less control and less compensation. It was a digital plantation system, scaled globally and funded by autocrats. And the dark money made it possible to sustain losses long enough to trap millions of workers in a system they couldn't escape because traditional taxi jobs had been destroyed. But perhaps the darkest aspect of Uber's rise was what it revealed about how we value innovation versus ethics in the modern economy. The company successfully convinced regulators, media, and the public that breaking the law was justified if it created enough consumer convenience, that destroying existing industries and livelihoods was acceptable if it led to a better app experience, that taking money from authoritarian regimes was smart business if it funded growth. Uber's real innovation wasn't the technology. It was proving that with enough capital and enough narrative control, a company could rewrite the rules of capitalism itself. They demonstrated that in a world of venture capital excess and sovereign wealth funds looking for returns, accountability was optional. The darkness wasn't in the algorithms or the apps. It was in the realization that we had collectively decided that none of it mattered as long as a car arrived in 5 minutes. Today, Uber operates in over 10,000 cities worldwide. The Saudi Public Investment Fund remains one of its largest shareholders. The company finally achieved its first profitable quarter in 2023, more than a decade after its founding, and after accumulating over $30 billion in losses. The early investors made fortunes. The authoritarian regimes gained legitimacy and influence in the global economy. And the rest of us learned to stop asking where the money comes from, as long as the service keeps working. Travis Kalanick walked away a billionaire. His fortune built on dark money, regulatory evasion, and a business model that transferred wealth from workers to investors on an unprecedented scale. The empire stands. The money remains dark, and every ride is a reminder that in the modern economy, convenience has a price we've agreed not to see. The story of Uber isn't really about transportation. It's about power, about what happens when the machinery of Silicon Valley innovation becomes the vehicle for authoritarian capital to flow into democratic societies. About how we built a world where the same app that helps you get to work is funded by regimes that murder journalists and crush dissent. About the moral compromises we make without even realizing we're making them, because the convenience is too seductive to question. The dark money behind Uber's rise revealed a truth about modern capitalism that we're still too uncomfortable to fully acknowledge. In a global economy where sovereign wealth funds from autocracies control trillions of dollars and venture capital chases growth at any cost, the line between innovation and corruption has become so blurred it's functionally invisible, and we're all complicit. Every time we open the app, every time we accept the convenience without asking what it cost to create, every time we look the other way because the alternative is inconvenient. The phantom empire is still growing, still expanding, still funded by money that asks no questions and answers to no one. And somewhere in a boardroom, in a sovereign wealth fund office, in the algorithms that determine who gets paid what for their labor, the machinery continues its work. Silent, efficient, inevitable. This is the future we built. This is the price we paid. And the darkness isn't coming. It's already here, in your pocket, on your screen, waiting for you to request your next ride. Subscribe and listen to our next story below.